As I was reading this gospel reading in preparation, it kind of struck me just the wisdom and the logic as this gospel reading starts out. Can a blind person guide a blind person? Will not both fall into a pit? And there's a logic to this, and it makes sense. You know, this is where we come up with the blind leading the blind, and it seems to be that is what's going on today, and especially when it comes to our politics and our politicians, it's particularly here in Illinois. In Illinois, we've got some things coming up that are quite detrimental to the society, and actually, Bishop Malloy, it's such an urgent thing. Bishop Malloy wanted this letter to be read at all the masses, and I figured it was so important I needed to really talk about it in the homily, and how our politicians are leading us, and hopefully we're not blind to this, because what they are feeding us is worse than something from a rotten tree. Sour milk doesn't taste too good, and it doesn't take too much to know what that tastes like. This letter was written about some bills that are being proposed in the state level. Before I read it, I want to kind of give you a prequel, because kind of explain it to you, because as I'm reading, sometimes when you're reading, you know, it doesn't come out the same way, and it's easy to lose what's actually going on. At the state level, they're contemplating to allow for partial birth abortion. If you're not familiar with that, it's exactly what it says. In the process of giving birth, the baby is aborted. So basically the process is they breech the baby, turn the baby around so the body comes out first. And they leave the head in the womb, and that's when the womb, just the head is left in there, that's when they kill the baby. So for some reason, our politicians have been so blind, they decided this must be a good thing. And of course, this is what they're talking about: health care, women's health. So this is like the dog whistle for women's health, you know, so that's what they're calling it. There are also some other difficulties with this bill that they're proposing, or a couple bills that they're proposing. It would take away conscience rights for those who object to this on doctors and nurses and anybody who is involved in performing these abortions. So any doctor or nurse who would object and refuse to do it, or even to give advice to give somebody else to go where to get it, if they refuse to do that, they would lose their license, and they would no longer be able to profess to live their profession. On top of that, they're proposing in these same bills that parental consent would be null and void. In other words, if a 13-year-old girl wanted to get an abortion, their parents have absolutely no rights at all whatsoever in that decision process. And in fact, they don't even have to know about it. So these are the laws, and this is what Bishop Malloy is writing about. So I'll read this to you. Dear brothers and sisters in Christ, I write to you at a moment of profound challenge to the citizens of the state of Illinois. In recent weeks, Democrats in the House and Senate, following the examples of other states, have introduced bills that, if passed and signed, would expand attacks on the life of the unborn through abortion, while at the same time attacking rights of conscience and rights of parents of a minor child or an adult mentally or developmentally disabled child seeking an abortion. House Bill 1942 and Senate Bill 2495 in the state of Illinois, identical pieces of legislation, seek to strip the unborn of any protections at any stage of development. These bills declare abortion to be a fundamental right and an element of the provision of health care. As a result, the bill's repeal of the most fundamental acts of humanity and compassion for the child in the womb. Among other provisions, the bill repeals the current ban on the gruesome practice of partial birth abortions carried out on late-term preborn children. The legislation also mandates that all health insurance plans include abortion services provided at no cost and without restrictions. That means any business owner that is Catholic must provide it, or basically the repercussions of it. And basically, like the Obamacare did, doesn't matter if you're 80 years old, you still have to offer it. Which doesn't make any sense. Talk about the blind leading the blind, right? Hopefully we're not the blind, though. Also, new bills repeal Abortion Performance Refusal Act, which protects doctors and nurses in hospitals who refuse to permit, recommend, perform, or assist in abortion. In doing so, any rights of conscience, especially religious objections, are trampled upon and disregarded. Thus, the most fundamental core of each person is, in law, to be forced to cede to and to practice in partaking of the taking of innocent human life in the womb. At the same time, two other identical pieces of legislation, House Bill 2467 and Senate Bill 1594, repeal the Illinois Parental Notice of Abortion Act. That act, upheld unanimously by the Illinois Supreme Court just 6 years ago, has the common sense purpose of ensuring that parents would be part of the life-altering decision of their minor child or their adult mentally or developmentally disabled in the case that she seeks an abortion. So basically, 13-year-old girl can go get their abortion without the consent or even the knowledge of their parents. Taken together, these bills represent a monumental change and deliberate expansion of provision of abortion in our beloved state. Of course, we know that this is not a partisan question. The move toward expansion of the provision of abortion services took place also in 2017 when Republican Governor Bruce Rauner signed a bill allowing the use of tax dollars to pay for abortions in our state. I think that's why he's no longer governor. In both cases, the underlying issue is the very meaning of human life at its earliest stages and throughout its development until just prior to birth. By means of these bills, the overwhelming scientific evidence of membership of the fetus in the human family is disregarded. So too are the rights of conscience that are fundamental to our democracy and the salvation of our souls. For too long, our society has allowed for a de facto coexistence between our societal foundation recognizing the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and the destruction of a defenseless category among us who are too young to speak on their own behalf. These bills now propose to expand the logic of power and death that so divides us as a nation. As people of faith, we must take a stand against this tragic and mistaken action. Please begin with prayer for the defense of the unborn, but then include your involvement in the political process. Even if you have not done so before, please consider contacting your representative and senator to urge defeat of these bills at the state level. To find contact information for your legislators, please consult the Catholic Conference of Illinois. They have a website, www.ilcatholic.org, so that's Illinois Catholic, ilcatholic.org, or call the Life Office in the diocese. That's the 399-4300 phone number. Entrusting our efforts for all life, from the moment of conception until natural death, to the care of the Blessed Mother, I am sincerely yours in Christ, David J. Malloy. And so you can see just the radical, utter radical stance that the state of Illinois and those in the state of Illinois are willing to take to ensure the women's health, which is the dog whistle of abortion, the killing of innocent babies. Women's health, when they say this stuff, that's what they mean. They mean abortion. They don't mean breast cancer, cervical cancer, ovarian cancer. They're not talking about that. They could care less about it. How many bills, how many times do you hear them say things about that? Very few times. And in fact, Planned Parenthood does not offer any of that and refuse to. The only thing Planned Parenthood offers is abortion and contraception. Because heaven forbid, if there are certain kinds that they don't like propagate, would actually propagate. This is prejudices. And people who have prejudices would have carte blanche ability to be able to exercise their prejudices by killing people, unborn babies. They can give all the money they want to the generation that's already alive. There's nothing they can do about it. But they want to make sure that there are other people that will not be the years after them, and therefore exterminating their kind. This is the plan of Margaret Sanger from the beginning. She said so, we have it in writing. And this is so important. As Catholics, we must absolutely stand up for the defenseless, for babies of all creeds and colors. That is the true liberty and the true way of moving forward for our country and for our state. That is the true way of progressing true holiness, true grace, and for Jesus Christ. That's what we do as Catholics. And that's why the governments, and most governments throughout the world, do not want the Catholic Church in their country to be active. Because the Catholic Church is one, holy, Catholic, and apostolic. And because it's one, we have a unity in its people through the Pope. That means we have the ability, as a people, united under the Pope, to defend those who are defenseless. This is what we've done throughout history. This is why kings and many governments have not liked us. And it's about time, as Catholics in this country, we stand up for those who are defenseless, the baby. They have no voice, none at all. It's hard to scream when you're in the womb. And that's what they do. So I encourage you to say something. Let your politicians know. Let them know by email, snail mail, phone calls. Do your part. Do your Catholic duty before your politicians, and let them know that you will not stand for this abuse on people in our country, in our state, both at the state level and at the governmental level. You may not have heard in the news, but recently, our government officials at the government level have decided that infanticide is not something worth protecting against. Infanticide, after the baby is born, they said that it might be okay for a child to be killed. After the birth, screaming, crying outside the womb, alive, breathing. And they did not ban it. They had the opportunity to ban it, and they refused to do this. Our elected officials, we need to let them know that this is absurd, and that our votes will count. If you voted for these politicians, you need to let them know. I'm glad you did, in a certain sense, because I didn't necessarily vote for them. I knew who the ones were that are very pro-death and pro-infanticide. I know who they are. I didn't vote for them. But if you voted for them, that stands. You stand for a vote that they may have lost. And that might motivate them to change their tune. I won't change their tune. I've already written to them. They've just given me the letter saying, oh, well, this is for women's health, and abortion is part of that women's health, and we all know abortion is women's health. And so they just gave me a letter saying, forget you, I'm going to do what I want. But if you voted for them, that'll get their notice. Please, as a community, as God's people, we have an obligation to protect those who are less fortunate. Please, please do so, and let them know that this is not right. The diocese is organizing a bus trip on March 20th to go down to Springfield to let them know. If you would like to go, let them know. I'm going to see if I can go and be on the buses with them. But also write those letters to both the state officials about these particular ones that he talked about at the state, but also let your representatives at the governmental level that you do not stand for abortion, and in particularly infanticide, where the baby would be killed outside the womb.